I have played two completely different Dragon Age games lately, Dragon Age Veilguard and Dragon Age Dreadwolf. And you may ask, what the hell are you talking about? First, for those who doesn't know, Dragon Age Veilguard initially had the title Dragon Age Dreadwolf. Later it got renamed. However, while playing the game I could see two different games, two different sets of ideas, like what the game is about. And there are two answers to that question. The first part of the game, the main story, is about Solas, about his rebellion against other elven gods, about his regrets and hard choices he had to make as the leader of the rebellion. That's what I call Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and that part of the game was pretty much perfect. The second part of the game, which is much bigger, is quests of your companions, and they are about something completely different. Namely about finding yourself. Who are you and what you wanna be? And no, I'm not speaking about Tash questline, but about at least 5 questlines of your companions. Yes, there is Tash that everyone knows about, but also Hardin. She is trying to find herself. What is she? Is she just Hardin or a part of Titans? Nev's questline. Nev has to decide to be Docton Protector or a beacon of hope. Here again we see the conflict within Nev. What should she be? One way or another, every character except Davrin has this exact internal conflict. What am I? What should I be? At least 5 questlines are about the same thing. And that's what I call Dragon Age Veilguard. That part of the game is trash. Now, before we move on, this is not a review, this is a video critique, where I will explain where did BioWare messed up, and sometimes what BioWare should have done differently for the game to be better. But for those who are interested, let me rate the game really quick. The game is 6 out of 10. Now, in the first part of the video, we will discuss more casual topics. The second part of the video will be more of an in-depth analysis of gameplay. So let's go on. Davrin, though, is the only character which doesn't have an internal conflict about who he is and what should he be. His conflict is pretty much external, and that's the only questline that I genuinely liked. But even here we had a lot of quests that were boring, like go pick mushrooms for sun. Now Davrin is the only character that I actually cared about. I didn't come to care for any other characters. Even about Hardin. I thought I will care about her because she was in Inquisition. But no. What can I say? I guess BioWare had concepts of interesting characters. Now, the worst character in the game is of course Tash. Tash is not only uninteresting, but also obnoxious, rude and judgmental. Completely unlikable character. Now, if we have already mentioned Tash, let's discuss the HR in the room. Let's talk about wokeness. Everybody likes to talk about wokeness, right? The terminology itself that BioWare used in the game is a huge issue. I mean, Tash's character is a big issue itself, but we have already talked about it. Now, the term non-binary and trans are modern terms, and are not typical for the era that the game is supposed to represent. For example, to hear such words in Mass Effect games would not feel so forced because Mass Effect is supposed to represent an era after those terms were invented. For example, you can't use the word skyscraper referring to a tall building in Dragon Age. You would call it a tower, because the word skyscraper is a relatively modern word, and in people's mind is not associated with the era that Dragon Age is supposed to represent. That's why people feel the HR in the room. It is clear that BioWare cared more about pleasing certain groups of people and about their own views, rather than the structural integrity of the setting of the game. And how can people that don't care about the structural integrity of the game create a good game? Now, let's go back a little. So, I have played through the game twice. My first playthrough, I have played as I would do it normally. I did all the companions' quest lines, some of the side quests, and the main quest line. While playing the game, I was kinda surprised that BioWare decided to pull out a suicidal mission from Mass Effect 2. For those who doesn't know, in Mass Effect 2 your companions could die if you don't do their personal missions. The same BioWare did with Veilguard. At least the game emphasized it. So I decided to try out what will happen if you don't do their personal quests. And yes, the characters do die if you don't do their quests. Interesting detail is that the game decides to punish you to the end, by not giving you the option to trick souls with a fake dagger as it would normally. Now, the story with the fake dagger is stupid to begin with. Like, where did they get the pure lyrium off screen and shape it into a dagger? Quoting, I guess, Hardin, even dwarves from Orzammar don't work with pure lyrium. It is too dangerous. Like, the fake dagger doesn't make sense. It would be one thing if the making of the dagger would be included in, for example, Hardin's personal questline, and by doing her questline, you would save at least 3 of your companions, like it was in Mass Effect 2. But no, the game just ignores the fake dagger if you don't do the personal questlines. Now, before we move on, let me quickly remind you to leave your generous and glorious like to this video, and subscribe to the channel for more quality content. Thank you. Now let's go back to discussion about companions. I got tired of dialogues with companions. That's never happened in previous Dragon Age games, nor in the original Mass Effect games. Hell, I even enjoyed some of the dialogues with companions in Mass Effect Andromeda, more than in Veilguard. And that's telling. The only dialogues that I've enjoyed in Veilguard is probably our chats with Solas. They're well written, you feel the character. You feel that Solas is really the god of treacheries, lies and rebellion. Now, if we have already mentioned dialogues, I must say that there are not enough dialogues between the companions on the field. They often repeat. I never noticed it in previous games. Just let them be quiet. No need to repeat the dialogues that I've already heard. That's so stupid. Now also about the dialogues, about the cringiness in the sarcastic dialogues. It was cringy in the previous games, but can someone tell BioWare that it is okay to not have sarcasm option in every dialogue? If you can think of a sarcastic dialogue, just don't give that option, no need to make it cringe. But it isn't just the sarcastic dialogues, the dialogues are bad in general. For example, you can't be mean, you basically have only good dialogue options. You are infinitely good. Even in Mass Effect 3, when we thought that we had bad dialogue options, we still had the ability to choose mean dialogues. And of course, Veilguard is nowhere near Baldur's Gate 3. Literally no choice making. No, not even that. No illusion of choice making. You are infinitely good. I get that maybe they wouldn't want to let you to be mean to your companions. But we can't even be mean to our quest givers, etc. Remember how in Dragon Age Origins, you could sacrifice a child to a demon to get blood magic? Forget. Hell, not even our companions have the guts to do something questionable. Like Lucanis. He didn't even kill Ilario after I decided to help Dogtown instead of Treviso. And that was supposed to make him harsher. And the worst thing an assassin can do with a traitor is to send him to prison?
Pathetic.
Now, one more thing about companions before we move on. We concentrated a lot on companions because companions were the strongest BioWare trait in their history. And now it seems that it is the weakest trait. So, after playing the game, I realized that I hate the fact that the game is not named Dreadwolf, because Veilguard is just gibberish. Yes, we kinda protect the Veil, but it is not a title of the group like it was in Dragon Age Inquisition, where we literally built Inquisition. Like, it doesn't make sense. Our companions can get a special skill, and when it is locked, it says, Achieve Hero of the Veilguard status to unlock. And how do we become the hero of the Veilguard? By dealing with our personal issues, of course. So, can someone explain me how dealing with your gender issues make you a hero of the Veilguard? Make it make sense, even if we take the best companion questline, Davrin's. That's the best questline. But how does it make you a hero of Veilguard? Maybe a hero of Griffins? Yes. But what does it have to do with the Veil? That's why I say that the name Veilguard is just gibberish. The name was never pronounced in the game. After playing the game, for me, the change of the title from Dreadwolf to Veilguard symbolizes the shift from a game that we all wanted to the game that nobody wanted. In general, your first hours of the game, you are in that Dreadwolf part of the game. You have an illusion that everything is great and maybe it's even the game of the year. But as you keep playing the game, it becomes more boring. New and new issues pop up, and then you realize that the game is boring and it's definitely not good. And the same story with gameplay. You start playing and it appears that it is really good. The combat is cool in the first 10 hours of the game, but after that it has nothing to offer. There are almost no combos, and those few combos that are present feel repetitive after 10 hours of gameplay, and they're all not worth doing. For example, jump attacks deal more damage, but it deals a little bit more, so it makes no sense to use it. Majority of your abilities doesn't add gameplay variety. Some you apply on the area, with others you strike. Majority of skills are passive, and only some add gameplay variety. By the way, if I've already mentioned skill trees, I've spent hours on just reading the descriptions of the skills, what skill does, all the terminology and so on. And as I said earlier, there are almost nothing that the skill tree adds to gameplay, but you spent hours in it. That's why I hate skill trees in games nowadays so much. That's what I like in Stalker 2. No bullshit, only your gear and your knowledge. Pure gameplay. And Stalker 2 is more RPG than the Veilguard, which is a shame. Now, game developers love to make skill trees big, but it is such a waste of our time that I can't. Now, talking about abilities. Should I even mention that abilities after level 20 become useless? They deal too little damage, so they're not worth pausing the game to use them. Yes, on a controller, if you press left trigger, you can do a quick access and then it makes sense to use them. You don't need to pause the game to open the ability wheel. But the problem is that depending on your enemies, at least when I was playing on a higher difficulty, you need to constantly change your abilities to fit the enemies, to make sure that you are not using abilities that the enemies are resistant to. So it turns out that I would constantly shuffle abilities, so it is hard to remember what button to press. Of course, it is not impossible to remember which ability you have on the hotkeys, but it certainly does not become as automatic as, for example, the dodge button. The same story with the ability of your companions. Because I would constantly shuffle my companions, it is hard to remember on which button which ability is. So, if you want to use the abilities of your companions, you would definitely pause the game and open the ability wheel. That problem appeared because BioWare decided to make your companions unplayable characters, but you can still use their abilities. Because of that, the number of your abilities are reduced to 3. That leads to ability wheel and constant shuffling of abilities, which leads to abilities being harder to use. And also you can change them mid-fight, which is stupid, because first of all, why not? And second of all, it happened with me a couple of times, when I only had the abilities that the enemies are immune to. Continuing on the ability topic, as I said earlier, they are too weak. And here we go on time to kill ratio. The enemies are too meaty. At the beginning of the game it feels good, because the killing time was shorter. Later, about 10 hours into the game, it is no longer the case. In order the enemies to not feel like a drag, ordinary enemies kill time should not be more than 20 to 30 seconds. For mini-bosses it should be around 1.5 to 2 minutes. Otherwise the fight feels tiring. One more reason why the gaming experience gets worse in about 10 hours into the game. You are entering in the Veilguard stage, meaning you are doing uninteresting companion quests. The gameplay variety ended. As the enemies get more meaty, the impact of your hits, of your attacks, disappear. Enemies just absorb damage as their animation doesn't reflect anything. They become like sponges that absorb damage. So the combat becomes less satisfying. The animation just doesn't let you feel that the attack went through. If the enemy wouldn't have a health bar, you wouldn't know that your attacks are landing. You would just think that the game glitched and you did nothing. That's what I mean that there is no impact of your attacks. Also, enemies attack only you. 95% of the time, you are the target, because your teammates have no health bar. So, if there are like 3 enemies, your gameplay transforms into a game of dodging. I guess it depends on your difficulty setting, because I've played on normal and 1 level above. But even on normal, you are constantly the primary target of the enemies. Hogwarts Legacy had the same issue. Let me just say, It is a bad way to do a difficulty setting. Like, look at Souls games, they are hard without it. So, all the enemies attack you at once, and you are constantly dodging. Especially if there's a lot of long-range enemies, you are always the target. That's by the way the reason why using long-range attacks, such as shield throws or magic beams, is completely useless in the game, because you are constantly overwhelmed by enemies, and you simply don't have the time to charge those attacks. Also, I must add that 99% of damage that the enemy gets is from you. The companions are useless. They're only useful when you use their abilities. Now, the exploration in the game is also pretty shitty. As you enter in a Veilguard stage, as you are let free to explore, it becomes obvious that the exploration in the game sucks. I call Veilguard a game of closed doors. No, not even doors, but closed areas. So, an area of the map is closed, and that's okay. The developers need to protect some sections of the game for whatever reason, like for the missions of your companions, for example. But the problem is that in that area there are other stuff. Like for example, I wanted to access the memories of Solace, but that area is closed by the Demon Guardian, so I can't. Or the area may just be closed like that, with no explanation. The game will just tell you that the area is closed. So no exploration for you, little wanderer. BioWare should take a note from Bethesda. For example, in Skyrim's Thieves Guild quest, you and Mercer Frey are supposed to go into a dungeon. The dungeon is locked. Bethesda didn't close the whole area of Winterhold, where the dungeon is located, but only the dungeon itself. By the way, BioWare, at least what is left of it, doesn't do dungeons. There are hardly any dungeons in Veilguard. The benefit of having dungeons in games is that you can lock stuff that you wanna lock and not lock anything besides it. Veilguard literally sent me many times on missions to locations that are not accessible. Why give the quest to me in the first place if I can't access the area? And the last thing about gameplay. Sometimes you can't dodge if the terrain is wrecked. I literally fought a boss for half an hour and got it to 15% HP and died because my character can't dodge in the direction of the most tiny bump. It can't even dodge when you want to go from a higher platform to a lower platform. It just stucks at the edge of the platform, and often the terrain where you fight is pretty flat, so it doesn't happen often, but sometimes that's a problem. Maybe it will get fixed, but I doubt it, because it seems that in this way the developers intentionally protect gamers from falling from an edge. Now, let's summarize the gameplay section. At first it seems nice, but as you progress the game, the combat gets repetitive. Abilities become less effective, the enemies more meaty and less responsive to your hits. The combat itself becomes a routine. The exploration sucks, and as your companions are useless, you are under constant pressure being chased by a horde of enemies. Now, before we move on, let me remind you to leave your generous and glorious like to this video and subscribe to the channel. There are a lot of videos on a broad variety of video game topics. You can see the content on your screen, so feel free to subscribe if you are interested. Now let's move on, we still have a few things to discuss. Like for example, why can't I use the items of the companions? For example, the Staff of Emmerich. I am the same faction as him, and the same class as him. The staff is way better than mine, and Emmerich deals like 5% of the damage that I do. But no, I can't, because the game said so, and that's really annoying. Now let's talk about the rewards in the game. For example, rare red items which you earn by defeating major boss battles are often shit. Side note, sorry for my footage. I messed up and it got ruined. Now, just look at this. Me being level 25 defeating a boss of level 50, and this is my reward. First, 1000 XP, which is nothing. Second, a ring that gives advantages and disadvantages, which is shit. And you may say, it isn't the game's problem that you decided to take on a boss that is twice your level. Yes, maybe, and it is not what I'm complaining about. But the fact that I took on a boss twice my level doesn't excuse that the reward is shit. And I don't think BioWare understands how to do magic items that have advantages and disadvantages. In order for it to not be garbage, it has to be so that you can build your build around it. And that's it for criticism. But let's discuss some things that I've observed. First of all, Dragon Age Veilguard is obviously inspired by God of War, especially in crosspath and force location. We can see it in architecture, the combination of stone and gold, in the design of enemies and NPCs, especially in spirits and darkspawn. Traveling on boats and runes on different objects. Even chests animation is similar. I mean how chests glow from within, etc. And it's cool and all that they got inspired by such a cool game, but the product that we've got is nowhere near God of War. I have already finished recording the voice and started recording the video, and since I finished playing the game a couple of weeks ago, I forgot how ugly the game looks, particularly the NPCs. The style itself is ugly, the NPCs literally look like they're from Dragon Age Origins. But it isn't 2009 anymore. What else? We've got huge lore drops. I liked it. I think it's remnants from Dragon Age Red Wolf times. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on Dragon Age lore, so I can't say if the lore is any good, like if it makes sense, if it didn't create some plot holes in the lore, and stuff like that. As I said earlier, I had 2 playthroughs, one as a mage and one as a warrior. While playing as a mage in the last mission, it was cool because I could almost throw my abilities on pair with Solus. So it looked cool, at least visually, and when I was playing as a warrior, I felt like a barbarian compared to Solus, throwing dropkicks around and waving my hammer. So there is that little difference in playstyle that I find funny. And the last thing before we summarize it all. There is a plot twist about one character at the end, and it is my favorite character in the whole Dragon Age universe, and I think they did it right, with respect. Now let's summarize it all. It is a game that had potential to be a freaking masterpiece, but took a drastic turn before it had a chance to become what it should have been. Considering all of that, I will make a new video about the future of BioWare. I did a video about that 4 months ago. But now that Veilguard got released, it needs an update. So if you wanna see that, make sure you are subscribed, and thank you for watching. Now go and check out this video. See you later.